we're going to ask this same questions of every candidate. We'll just go one to the next to the next. Okay, so we're going to start with Ms. Schubert first. Here's the question. Californians today have concerns that crime is once again on the rise and that their safety may be at risk. So in your view, is California a safe place right now? If it is not, what is your answer to make it safer?
There's no question that crime is a top issue for Californians and they don't feel safe. As a career prosecutor for 31 years, I have watched the demise of public safety over the last several years. Many of the policies that we're seeing championed by our legislature, our attorney general, our prosecutors in Los Angeles and San Francisco counties are policies that I would say are tsunami of poor public policies that are in fact endangering. And what we're seeing in particular is the weakening of accountability. The fact that we don't call gun crimes violent crimes, the fact that we don't call hate crimes or domestic violence, the early releases, which are now being defended by the Attorney General's office, where we're allowing people that are in fact dangerous to be released early from prison, only to get out again and commit more crimes. So yes, we are at very dangerous times. We have a massive number of illegal guns on the streets of California in the hands of felons who should not have them, yet we turn around and release them early from prison, even though we've repeatedly tried to prosecute them. So what we're seeing is prosecutors having the tools taken away from them to hold people accountable, and then our policies, our rogue prosecutors and our legislature and now our prison system wanting to let them out of prison early. That is dangerous for California, and that's why I'm running for California Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Early. The question for you is California a safe place right now? And if not, what's your answer to make it safer?
California is not a safe place right now. We have millions of people up and down the state afraid for themselves, afraid for their children, afraid for their parents, afraid for their families, their neighborhoods, their communities. We see what's going on. The news shows are filled with reports about what is going on. And frankly, I call California a criminal's paradise. And this criminal's paradise has been largely created by the laws, rules, and regulations that have come out of Sacramento for so many years now. And we have to get tough again on crime. We have to change the narrative in Sacramento, in this state, such that criminals, and they may be criminals, but they're not stupid. They need to know that crime does not pay again. Some of the first things I would do if I get this job, I will call a meeting of all of the law enforcement leaders in this state, all the district attorneys, all the sheriffs, all the chiefs of police, and they'd sit down with me and my staff, and however long it takes, we'd go through, and I want to hear from the people on the streets, the people living this stuff, to find out why they believe we have come to this criminal's paradise. And then we will take whatever steps we can, and I can as the Attorney General, to start remedying these issues. You know, the Attorney General has a loud voice and can use that loud voice if they want to, and I absolutely will do that. Of course, Proposition 47 and 57, what I want to do is lead a referendum to get rid of those. You know, I was, you know, in addition to running a nationally recognized law firm, I was lead lawyer for the Recall Newsom movement. You saw Netter on there a few minutes ago. Netter and Orrin Heatley, good friends of mine, they know how to get the signatures for very little money. And as Attorney General, I'd be writing the ballot and title summary. And I would also have a loud voice. So when the millions come in of advertisements to try and keep 47 and 57 on the books, I will be out there every day explaining to the people what it takes to get rid of it. But it takes somebody who is not politically correct, me, somebody who's tough on crime, and somebody who wants to protect all of our law-abiding citizens of every race, creed, and color, and that's me.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Bonta. Is California a safe place right now? And if it is not, what's your answer to make it safer?
Well, let me first say thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I really appreciate the dialogue and discussion that we're having. I think one point to look at is the data, of course, which shows that we are and have been in historical lows when it comes to crime in California. And the data shows that there are some rises in some crimes in some places, and that those rises are unacceptable. Some are violent, some are brazen. And we must do everything in our power to keep the people of California safe. It's not the people of California don't think about the data necessarily. They think about how they feel. And if they don't feel safe, that's important. We need to make sure that they do feel safe and that they are safe. So that's why public safety has been job number 1, 2, and 3 for me as California's Attorney General over the last year. And here are some of the steps that we've taken to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe, our communities are safe, that everyone in California deserves to be and is safe. We are moving aggressively to keep illegal guns off our streets, because you cannot talk about crime without talking about gun violence. In 2020, the increase in gun deaths accounted for 91% of the overall jump in homicides. Violent crime is being fueled by guns. It's that simple. And our office is fighting back. We are using our first in the nation, unique in the nation, only in the nation APPS program, Armed Prohibited Persons System program, to remove guns from those who should not have them because of a criminal conviction, because of a restraining order, because of a mental illness. We're defending California's common sense gun control laws in court. We have some of the strictest gun laws in the state, and because of that, one of the lowest firearm mortality rates in the nation. Excuse me, one of the most strict gun laws in the nation. And so those things go hand in hand. We're supporting violence intervention programs, which prevent violence from happening in the first place, have decreased, cut by over half homicides in places like Stockton. We're promoting red flag laws, gun violence restraining orders, to prevent, again, violence from happening in the first place through processes and approaches that we know work. We're working with our partners at the local level to tackle violent criminal street gangs. We're suing ghost gun manufacturers. We're working with the ATF to treat ghost guns as what they are, guns, to make sure that people that they're serialized and their background checks. We are taking down violent criminal organizations. We've done that in cities throughout the state, from Sacramento to Fresno to San Bernardino to Visalia. We have literally stopped homicides in progress multiple times. We stopped 2 mass shootings in progress, one eerily similar to the tragic event that happened in Sacramento, where one organized criminal group was going to shoot another organized criminal group at a bar literally the night before the Sacramento shooting. We stopped it. So we are active. We are busy. We're also taking on organized criminal retail theft. We had the sentencing in.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Mr. Hochman, can you answer the question now, please?
Sure. And again, thank you for inviting me. The question, if you could repeat the question just to make sure I'm answering the right one.
Sure, absolutely. The question is, many Californians don't feel California is a safe place right now. In your view, is California a safe place right now? And if not, what is your answer to make it a safer place?
Certainly. So I actually agree with the proposition that most Californians do not feel or believe that California is a safe place. And I know that because traveling up and down the state, I ask one question amongst all voter groups that I speak with, which is, do you feel more safe and more secure today in California than you have in the past 2, 4, 6, or 8 years? And to a person, the answer is no. And what they're afraid of, as has been said before, to send their children, their parents, or their neighbors out into the neighborhood, because what they see is a spiral of lawlessness going on in our society, where you have both prosecutors at the district attorney level, and in particular, I'm focused on the LA and San Francisco prosecutors, along with the attorney general, not enforcing the laws that are on the books, whether it's the property crimes of $950 or less that allow one person to run out or even walk out of a CVS, that then leads to 2 people running out of a Walgreens, 80 people running out of a Nordstrom's, smash and grab robberies going on up and down the street, follow home robberies, even train robberies in Los Angeles. You have the overall feeling that our government is not doing its job. And what I would do is come in and actually set the tone from basically from above, and let people know that if there are district attorneys that decide that they won't, for instance, bring a gun or a gang enhancement because they have a blanket policy against enforcing those type of enhancements, even with the murders of law enforcement officers, that the state attorney general's office will come in and will do the job that it's obligated to do in the various counties if those prosecutors are not doing their job. So I believe that, again, that the safety and security of our state is priority 1, 2, or 3, but you can't just say that. You have to do it in form of action. The Attorney General points out his enforcement of the APPS system against armed prohibited persons. But the reality is, even though they've seized 1,500 guns, you've had actually the number of people on that list grow over the last year rather than shrink, despite the state legislature devoting millions of dollars to the acquisition of these legal guns from prohibited persons. So we would actually do in both action and not just words, the promotion of the safety and security of the people of the state of California.
Thank you for that. Why don't we go to Josh Golke, the Deputy Opinion Editor for the Sacramento Bee. Josh?
Hi, everyone. There's been a lot of attention and criticism directed at the state corrections department's system of credits for release from prison. And I'm wondering whether each of you thinks this is a legitimate issue, whether we can prevent the sort of crime we saw in Sacramento through changing the system, and whether there's anything you can do about it as Attorney General. And we could go in reverse order, start with Mr. Hochman this time.
Certainly. I believe there is stuff that can be done to deal with the situation. Proposition 57 basically said we're going to give certain credits to nonviolent offenders. But what the problem is that the list of what are otherwise violent offenses that have not been designated as violent offenses as the law is significant. You know, one of the examples is in the recent Sacramento shooting. You had someone who was able to, back in 2018, actually be convicted of felony assault for dragging their girlfriend by the hair, beating her with her belt in a car, and be convicted of felony assault, yet it was deemed a non-violent offense under the law, because the law hasn't changed to incorporate that at the Proposition 57 level. What ended up happening with that gentleman is he got a 10-year sentence, but in 2022, he was released because of these good time credits in time for him to show up on the streets in April of 2022 in Sacramento and participate at some level, as to be determined, in the shootings that went on at 2 a.m. So I believe that the problem is that you have Proposition 57 that creates this whole nonviolent category of offenses that was not then amended to deal with the true violent offenses. As Attorney General, I would seek to actually make sure that as long as we have Proposition 57 on the books, we work very hard to label every violent offense a violent offense that would not qualify for Proposition 57 credits.
Thanks. Mr. Bonta.
Well, thank you for the question. Of course, the people of California, by an overwhelming supermajority, voted for Prop 57, are interested in recidivism reduction, rehabilitation programs. I think that we need to do more in both of those spaces when it comes to recidivism reduction. We have not done that as well as we should. The R in CDCR has not been as robust as it must. And through real programming, we can change the lives, transform lives, and have individuals who have made bad choices and hurt people make better decisions and be productive members of our society. But it must be done in a more robust way. We need to spend more time with MCRPs, the community reentry programs, where individuals in the last 6 months to a year of their sentence, when they will get out, they're getting out at some point. So in that last 6 months to a year, they are moved out of a locked facility into a secure community facility where they're given drug addiction programs if needed, anger management, mental health treatment. They get job training and a job, secure housing and food security, a supportive community so that they can be successful. It's not just some pocket change for gate money and a goodbye at the door and hope that you do well. Recidivism is a public safety threat. It's a public safety risk. We need to reduce it. And there are steps that we know work, and that is through anti-recidivism and rehabilitation investments. I think the connection of Prop 57 to the tragic Sacramento shooting is one that I think is premature. I think there's still more to be learned about that tragic situation, the different components to it. Certainly guns and our gun laws and gun safety is a critical issue. There was a machine gun involved, potentially a Glock switch. There were crimes in the plea deal that were not included in the plea deal. So there's a whole set of issues that need to be reviewed, I think, to be thoughtful as we identify what improvements we need to make going forward. But we have had good time credits for decades, long before Prop 57. And the idea of good time and rehabilitative credits are not new. No one should have believed that a 10-year sentence would lead to 10 years service of time, knowing how the credits work. So, and these are individuals who are going to get out. These are finite periods of time. These are not LWOPs or death sentences. And so when people are going to be get out after time served, they need to be prepared to be successful. And so we need to do more when it comes to anti-recidivism, when it comes to rehabilitation. And that's something that I've worked on as a legislator. I will continue to work on as Attorney General, working with the governor on the MCRPs, making them more expansive, more services, more programs to really help individuals be the successful members of society. So, and of course, the shooting should
I'm
not
sorry.
have. So, okay.
I'm sorry. We have to cut you off.
No problem.
Mr. Early.
Yeah, there's been, again, California's become a criminal's paradise, largely because of the very policies that Mr. Bonta is talking about and that he supports and that Gavin Newsom supports. There's been a general watering down of these good time credits, and COVID was used as a pretext to keep doing that. We have to get rid of Proposition 57, as I talked about a little bit earlier. Frankly, there has been a systemic failure in the criminal justice system in California. I am tired of hearing people like Mr. Bonta, and who knows if anybody else on this screen talks about it, keep blaming this on guns, okay? We have Second Amendment rights. These criminals will be able to get guns. They already can get guns in one of the most highly regulated Second Amendment states in the nation. You keep regulating further, they'll be the ones that get the guns, and the law-abiding citizens who want to defend themselves and their families in this criminal's paradise won't be able to get them. So let's talk about this systemic failure, which I never hear from the current administration. This maniac, frankly, who got out and is alleged to have been involved in the savagery that happened in Sacramento 2 or 3 weeks ago, he should never have been out on the street, but for the systemic failure. The good time credits, Proposition 57, and the fact, frankly, that the Sacramento DA could have tried to prosecute him for felony kidnapping when he was first pulled in, but there was a plea deal entered. If he had been in there for felony kidnapping, even with the good time credits, that fellow Smiley would still be incarcerated. Let's talk more about the systemic failure. There was that terrible shooting again in Sacramento in that church up there. A father goes in with his 3 daughters and a chaperone. And before all was said and done in that church, he had murdered his 3 daughters, the chaperone. I believe he killed himself too. In this state, but for the sanctuary state law, but for the lax bail policies, that savage, frankly, would never have been out on the streets. That is part of this systemic failure. And yet all we hear about from the Bontas and the Newsoms when these terrible incidents happen is guns. And frankly, I've come to a point where I believe they say guns to cover up the fact that they know about these systemic failures. You have the smash and grab going on, for example. We've all seen that. Newsom comes out, he says, okay, we're going to increase funding to law enforcement for $300 million. Great. I've always said we should be increasing funding to law enforcement, even when many people were saying defund, defund, defund. But while that is going on one hand, it's a sleight of hand. We've got the Newsom Crime Commission on the other hand, which I would say 95% of California doesn't even know about, where these 7 people are looking through the entire penal code to water down our statutes or recommend watering down.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Early.
Yeah.
Schubert.
First of all, I think it's important that people understand, what 57 did. And I have been fighting 57 since really it was on the ballot. I was the named plaintiff against Governor Brown for the ballot title and summary that was written up as, quote, early release for nonviolent felons. And Prop 57 did not create nonviolent felons. We've had those laws for years. And quite frankly, as a woman and as a prosecutor, I'm ashamed that our government does not call domestic violence, human trafficking, drugging and raping a woman, felons with firearms are not considered nonviolent. So we've been raising this alarm for years. My office has been writing hundreds, if not more than 1,000 letters asking our Department of Corrections to not let people out of prison early because they are handing out credits like they're Halloween candy. We know that individuals are violent. They have violent records. When I travel California and I ask folks, how many of you think felony domestic violence is a non-violent crime? No one raises their hands. Everyone thinks it's violent. So what can I do? What do I think about these credits? Well, that's why I have led the effort of 45 district attorneys to suing the Department of Corrections over the manner in which they are trying to implement these. Our Attorney General is defending that. In fact, his Deputy Attorney General said, well, the victims don't have enough money to sue, so we're going to win this lawsuit, which I find to be, quite frankly, offensive. If we wanted to really deal with the credits, the Attorney General should stand up and say, you know what, I do think hate crime should be a violent crime. I do think domestic violence should be a violent crime. I do think raping and drugging a woman should be a violent crime. And if we really want to stop the rampant gun violence on the streets of Sacramento or any other community, we ought to make felons in possession of firearms who go to prison over and over and over again not being given the opportunity now, if the corrections has their way, to get out of prison early. So what will I do as the Attorney General? I'm going to step into the fight that we've been trying for 15 years to make those crimes violent. By the way, last week in the Public Safety Committee, they again refused to have human trafficking of violent crime. If we really want to address these issues, if we really want to hold people accountable, and by the way, when we talk about recidivism, yeah, I think in substance, I agree with the Attorney General. We do want rehabilitation. But when you turbocharge credits in prison and you hand out credits like they're candy, we're not rehabilitating people. And we need to look at what is happening to people. We've released 27,000 inmates from prison since March of 2020. We need to be mindful of what that means for recidivism and public safety in California.
So the last couple of commenters made some comments directly about the Attorney General. So I'll give the Attorney General about a minute and a half to respond.
Happy to. And the first point I want to make is one that is well known to all, but based on what I heard, bears repeating, which is that one of the Attorney General's, the Department of Justice's duties and obligations is to provide representation, ethical representation, zealous advocacy for the departments and the agencies that we represent. And that includes, and we are the attorney in that role. They are the principal, and we provide them outstanding legal defense. So there seems to be a blending of the roles, and I just want to be clear about what the roles are. I'll also say I think it is important to follow the data, the evidence, when it comes to determining what crimes are considered violent. We need to be open to domestic violence being included as a violent crime, not because it's an emotional gut reaction, because it's a thoughtful, data-driven approach, including seeing the fact that about 2/3 of mass shooters are involved in shootings of their family members or have a history of domestic violence. That's an important data point, which means that we need to be open to change if something is not working as intended. We can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We need to be focused on rehabilitation, on systems that work, but also fix the broken parts when we identify through, again, facts, data, evidence that they are broken. So this is not ideological for me. This is about public safety for every community, every neighborhood in the state of California. If something's not working as designed or as believed,
thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
We're going to change.
Thank you very much. So I couldn't help but notice DA Schubert was responding to the comment about domestic violence and choosing data over emotion. Can you, as a DA, can you address that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been years that we've been advocating for these, and those in the legislature have continuously rejected it, including Attorney General Bonta, who's voted for bills that allow for diversion for domestic violence and hate crimes. So when we start talking about the data, we have to look at reality. We have to look at the fact that we know that there's far more theft, far more domestic violence, far more sexual assault than is reported. It's grossly underreported. So the fact that you want to claim that the data shows things, we know these crimes are underreported. So if we're really going to be a champion for women's rights and holding people accountable, we ought to call them what they are, which is violent crimes, and not dance around the issue time and time again for year after year, and have a zero bail policy, which has been advocated for, that allows domestic violence to get out on zero bail and have no supervision.
Thank you for that. We go to Yusuf. I'll get to you in a moment. We'll go to our friend Tad Weber.
I just wanted to follow up with Attorney General Bonta. It seems like what you're saying today, sir, is that as far as it regards domestic violence, you've seen the data and you're convinced that it is a violent crime. So my question to you would be, are you ready, as soon as we're done with the editorial board today, to talk to a friend in the legislature and get them to carry a bill to reclassify that as a truly violent felony?
I'm prepared to talk about the data that exists and to see what other data exists. The data that I see is compelling. The involvement in violent mass shootings, the history of domestic violence, I think that may be something that perhaps wasn't contemplated originally, but we've learned it since, and we need to rely on it, and it needs to drive our decisions and our action. So I am prepared to have a robust discussion with legislative colleagues about making changes that are necessary, that are data-driven, supported by evidence, and that are thoughtful in how we stop crime, including violent crime, and how we keep communities and neighborhoods safe.
Okay, I want to give Mr. Hochman and Mr. Early a chance to respond as well. So why don't we go with Mr. Hochman, for instance, who raised his hand, your response to the comments that were just made.
Certainly. SB 1042 is my response. You couldn't. This is the bill that was recently brought up in front of the Public Safety Committee that was going to make human trafficking a violent and serious felony. Full stop. That's all it sought to do. It's based 100% on the data. In fact, the data is from Mr. Bonta's California Attorney General's office. The human trafficking is commercial and sexual exploitation by force, fraud, fear, threats, coercion, and violence. You can't have a better definition of what's going on. And Mr. Bonta himself has called it modern day slavery. Yet somehow, some way, even though the data is unequivocal and overwhelming, Mr. Bonta was asked to be one of the supporters of SB 1042 and had the chance to actually turn his words into action and create a violent and serious felony in human trafficking, and chose to remain deafeningly silent. So again, if you're looking for an attorney general that's going to actually act on the data, as opposed to conference about it, talk about it, discuss it, it's not Mr. Bonta, it'd be myself.
Mr. Early?
Everything that Mr. Bonta talks about, frankly, troubles me greatly. We're looking at the Attorney General of the state of California, who cannot come out unequivocally and say that these crimes that we're talking about should not be reclassified as violent felonies. You want to know why we have a criminal's paradise in this state? This is not. This should not be wishy-washy. Mr. Bonta says that this is not ideological for him. Every decision he makes is ideological. Mr. Bonta is an ideological triplet of both this Gascon down here and Bodine up there. I tell you, I get this job and those two are not recalled by then. I'll do everything I can. I will charge great lawyers and DOJ to look at the cases we're going to take away from both Gascon and Bodine. We're going to protect the citizens again. I'll tell you something else. We need more beds in this state, prison beds. You know, one of the pretexts that's used for emptying the prisons these days, not enough beds because of the law that prevents overcrowding. Nobody's looking, or very few people are looking at the fact that the present administration is closing prisons. Nobody's looking at the fact, frankly, at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal ruling came down about 6-7 months ago, give or take, that said it was perfectly fine for private companies to build prisons, which then Mr. Newsom and Mr. Bonta immediately appealed, presumably, among other things, to maintain the pretext that there's not enough beds. We need to send a message loud and clear again in this state that if anybody is going to protect the citizens, is the chief law enforcement officer and legal officer in this state. And that's the position I'm running for. And that's one of the main reasons I'm running, is to protect all of our law-abiding citizens of every race, creed, color, and sexual orientation.
Thank you, Mr. Early. Appreciate it. Why don't we go to our colleague, Yusuf Beg, who is the assistant opinion editor for the Sacramento Bee. Yusuf?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Appreciate the time. I want to just kind of reorient this discussion a bit, because one of the things I feel like we end up talking about is the problems in California, not so much the policies and solutions. And when we have laws in place that can effectively address a lot of the things that are happening right now, you know, I think a lot of this comes back to the issue of enforcement and how this is being carried out at the local level. And so, you know, given, you know, a lot of this discussion is around gun violence and enforcement of gun laws, and those not being carried out effectively, and that leading to preventable deaths that we see in Sacramento, like we did on K Street and in Arden Arcade before that. I just want to get a sense of how each of you would sort of use your authority as Attorney General to ensure that these breakdowns in enforcement are not happening at the local level, so that we can reduce this scourge of preventable gun violence and preventable domestic abuse and so on. And so, Ms. Schubert, let's start with you on that. How would you use your power as Attorney General to improve that enforcement at the local level?
I think there's a number of things that we need to do. First of all, we need to fund law enforcement. And this movement across this country to defund law enforcement has done everything the opposite, which is to create this state of chaos. And in fact, when folks talk about Mr. Bonta, his latest recent legal advisor is someone that advocates for the defunding of law enforcement. What we need to do for enforcement, to take guns off the streets, to address violent crime, we first need to fund law enforcement to do their jobs, to go out into the community, to go after the individuals who are the drivers of violent crime. We know who they are. So felons in possession of firearms are perhaps the most dangerous individuals. We have to fund law enforcement. We have to have an AG who's willing to work with law enforcement across the state. I'm incredibly proud that I have the support of district attorneys and, you know, the frontline police officers across the state, because they understand I have the capability to do that. So we need to run operations. To fund those operations, we need to take the guns out of the hands of those individuals. We need to stop the violence. And when we prosecute them, we have to have the tools. And those tools have been consistently eroded by our legislature, by our policies, by rogue prosecutors like Gascon and Chesa Bodine. And when we actually convict them, we need to not let those individuals who are the drivers of violent crime out of prison at perhaps now at a third of their sentence without any adequate rehab. Because as I said before, as we, you know, turbocharge the credits and essentially gut our sentencing laws, we are eliminating our ability to rehabilitate people. And what that is dangerous for that person, dangerous for the community. It's not accountability, and it's not meaningful public safety. So as your next Attorney General, I have every bit of confidence that I will fully work to fund law enforcement, work with law enforcement, hold those individuals accountable, be in our legislature to fight these bad policies that continue to erode that accountability, and to give us back the tools that we need to deal with those drivers of violent crime and make people feel safe again, and in fact, be safe again.
If I could just jump in again, I feel like one of the issues here is that there aren't funds being moved from police departments. In fact, they're only growing around the state. So this, you know, this slogan of defund the police has not actually become a policy or a practice within California. Again, this is, I guess I'm trying to raise the question again about, we have laws on the books. We have red flag laws, policies that should be getting weapons out of the hands of violent offenders, yet the enforcement of those laws is not happening in local communities. And I'm trying to, I guess, sort of pose a question that gets at how you would use your authority to improve that enforcement. And so, Ms. Schubert, again, just to kind of reiterate on the point.
When you say we have the laws, I'm curious on what you mean by that, because for years, those laws have been taken away from us. The tools of, so let's talk about this crisis of drug addiction, mental health, and homelessness. Prop 47 had direct impact on that. We have seen rampant theft and this, you know, epidemic of fentanyl, drug addiction, people dying in the streets of our communities. So if we're going to continue to take away those tools, we're not going to be able to get people into drug treatment and mental health treatment like we need. We used to have drug courts that are very successful. When we talk about holding gang members or people that run around with guns accountable, when our legislature continues to erode that accountability, when we have repeat violent offenders that we're now just saying, let's just let them out of prison early, let's take away enhancements, let's have blanket policy so that we no longer have the ability to rehabilitate them. So I get what you're saying, but the laws have changed that impact not only enforcement, but accountability and making sure that those people are going to be removed from society and rehabilitated so that we're safer. So while we may say that, public safety is still funded, we clearly need more funding to be able to get the guns out of hands of people that should not have them, because we are probably at the most dangerous time, at least in my 31 years of experience. Maybe it's because we flooded the streets with EDD money and we gave $30 billion out to people that shouldn't have it. But we have a major gun violence problem, and it's not a gun law issue. It's a crime control issue. We can have all the laws in the world on gun control, but if we're not willing to go out there and fund law enforcement to go after those drivers of violent crime and then to actually hold them accountable and let them out early, then that's not good for public safety. Hopefully that answers
No, that's fair. Thank you, Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. Really important question. I'm glad you've asked it. It's critical to be working in collaboration with our local law enforcement to enforce the laws that we have, laws that we know work. Again, not being ideological and looking at the data and the evidence about what we know works. Gun violence restraining orders work. Red flag laws work. They've worked well in San Diego with the incredible city attorney and police chief that have made it, that have prevented crime and harm to individuals. I visited with them and then used the bully pulpit and the convening power of the Attorney General's office to push out GVROs as a tool to more cities and more local jurisdictions to encourage it, to provide training. I have an individual who will go work with any city who wants to have more gun violence restraining orders in their city attorney's office or their DA's office to use them more, because we know they work. They save lives. We know that violence intervention programs work. They should be in more places, saving more lives, not just Stockton or Oakland. They need to be used in more places to reduce those homicide rates by over half. Our armed prohibited person system works. We have worked in doing sweeps with local law enforcement in LA, in the Bay Area. We've pushed grant dollars to local jurisdictions to also enforce our app system so that they can be force multipliers. That works. We also need to create improvements so that we have relinquishment in court or at the time a restraining order is served. That would be a better approach, a safer approach as well. We have worked to enforce existing laws with our law enforcement partners throughout this state to keep people safe, to literally prevent murders and mass shootings. We did that recently in Fresno. We did it in Sacramento, in Visalia, in San Bernardino. That is enforcement of existing law, working hand in hand in collaboration, doing good police work, investigation, surveillance, to keep people from getting hurt and to enforce the existing laws. It's also important that we protect and defend the laws that we know have kept people safe in the state of California. Our 30-year-old assault weapons ban. When a district court judge said that an assault weapon is akin to a Swiss Army knife, we took issue with that. We moved for and secured a stay so that the assault weapons ban continued in California, and we are now defending it in front of the Ninth Circuit. When our large capacity magazine ban that the people of California voted for was challenged in court, we're defending that in court. Those tools need to remain because they keep people safe. And we have funded law enforcement in our office. I got our special agents a 12% increase because of the incredible work that they do keeping people safe. We need to fund the outcomes that we desire. So we will fund the police in ways that are necessary to keep us safe. I'm championing funding for to address homelessness and mental illness and drug addiction. That's absolutely critical. I've supported funding for body cameras for those who can't afford them in our local jurisdictions. And so we are about action. We've expanded our sexual predator apprehension trafficking laws that are on the books. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonta. Mr. Hochman, just to kind of reiterate the question, how would you use the authority of the Attorney General to ensure that there are no breakdowns in enforcement of the laws that are on the books to get at preventable gun violence deaths or domestic abuse and so on? How would you use your role?
Certainly. And you're focused on the 58 district attorneys, is my understanding. And I believe that many of those district attorneys, and I would include Ms. Schubert on that, are doing a good job, are doing a solid job in enforcing the law in their county. But let's focus on the ones that aren't. And I'll focus in particularly on two of the biggest jurisdictions, Los Angeles and San Francisco. What I start out is a little bit of confidence that that the problem is literally the district attorney and not the deputy district attorneys underneath them. One of the interesting statistics that's come out recently is that of the 800 deputy district attorneys in Los Angeles who took a vote, 97.8% of them voted to support the recall of their boss, George Gascon. Because I believe what happens is that when a district attorney comes in and enacts blanket policies that basically say we're not going to follow the law, whether it's the 3 strikes law, whether it's enhancements, special circumstances, treating all juveniles who commit any crime as juveniles and not trying them as adults, instituting no bail policies for an entire jurisdiction. Again, no matter the crime, no matter the person committing the crime, what you've done is you've set out certain leaders throughout the state that are sending the unmistakable message to criminals in their counties. And these are counties that probably all in or represent 15 to 20 million people of the state of California, that certain crimes have no consequences or little consequences in their book. So what can the California Attorney General do with those counties? Come in and basically send a different message. Empower in Los Angeles, it's over 800 deputy district attorneys to actually do their job. And say to these folks, look, if the district attorney decides to abdicate his job, the California Attorney General will come in and empower you, the deputy district attorneys who want to do their jobs, and bring in California Attorney General lawyers, if necessary, to actually prosecute the crimes that are on the books. So I think certainly part of it is money, and we can deal with money issues, and I don't think that was your crime. Certain part of it is dealing with the laws. And again, the laws in certain cases absolutely need to be changed, but I don't think that was your question. Your question was, what can the Attorney General do for prosecutors who are not enforcing the law? And I would send that unmistakable message. And hopefully, by the way, you wouldn't have to do it that often, because if the district attorney knew that the California Attorney General was not in complete alliance with them to go ahead and agree with it, we should basically be one of the let them go guys, that the message gets sent. And like deterrence and anything else, you don't have to do it that often. They would know that there's certain lines that can't be crossed. And more importantly, the public would know that there's someone new in charge at the state level who's actually going to get the job done and focus on their safety and security rather than just the interests of defendants.
Marcos, could I follow up with Mr. Hochman on that point?
Yeah, let's let Mr. Early answer the question, and then you can follow up.
Thank you, Marco. Listen, one of the things, before I answer the question directly, one of the things I believe Mr. Baig, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, said was that, well, we haven't seen defunding. Well, in LA County, Eric Garcetti and our city council defunded our LAPD $150 million. We're still trying to figure out where that $150 million went. The sheriff down here, Villanueva, is right now facing defunding from the LA County Board of Supervisors. He may be losing 4,000 people. A huge number of those are sworn officers. So unfortunately, there has been defunding, but thankfully, thank God, the narrative on defunding has changed to support what I was saying since day one of the defund movement. On enforcing the laws, we, as Attorney General, the Attorney General has to force, and in particular, what I call the rogue district attorneys, to enforce our laws. George Gascon is not enforcing our laws. Gang enhancements, gun enhancements, 3 strikes, not setting LWOP sufficiently enough, on and on. He is not enforcing the laws, and I absolutely agree with what one of my other opponents said. There's a huge number of deputy DAs down here in LA County. They are totally against what's going on with Gascon. We will take cases away from Gascon where he is not properly enforcing the law, excuse me, and we will let his deputies handle those matters. And instead of reporting up to Gascon, they're going to report up to me. And we will make sure that the laws are followed again. As far as juveniles, Gascon recently claims he had a change of heart. He would not prosecute juveniles for anything other than juvenile sentences. And he seemed to forget to understand that we have juveniles and then we have juveniles. All right. There are lots of juveniles. We should absolutely be focused on rehabilitating. So many young kids, they get in trouble. They're not highly violent crimes. We have to rehabilitate them. We have to get them on with their life, hopefully rehabilitate them in a way that they can live a good, decent, productive life in society. But then there are juveniles, some of the most violent criminals we have ever seen in this country. And you know them when you see them. And you know when they're not rehabilitatable or not. And you know when you should be prosecuting them, not based on the juvenile sentencing laws. So we have the laws on the books. We have to get more. Of course, attorney generals, we're not legislators. I would like to have a group of people that work for me that interface with the legislature to try and get our recommendations through and considered by the legislature. But it all starts with a change of culture in Sacramento, a change of culture that says we are going to support our law-abiding citizens again.
Thank you, Mr. Early.
Law-abiding citizens first again.
Appreciate it. All right, Tad, go ahead with your question.
Thanks, Marcos. Mr. Hochman, I was interested in your reply to Yusuf a minute ago, and in particular, your description of how you would, if I understood you correctly, go to Los Angeles County and basically overrule the DA there to follow the laws that you feel he is not following. The question is, that district attorney was elected by the people of that county to be their district attorney. So theoretically, they are good with what he's doing. How would you explain to them why you, not as the DA, but the state attorney general, who was not elected by those people necessarily, I guess we'll find out, how would you explain basically bigfooting on him?
3 different ways. First, as a constitutional officer, if I'm elected as attorney general, I actually have an obligation, not just a choice, but an obligation that where the law is not being carried out by district attorneys throughout the state, to come in and actually take over those prosecutions. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm very familiar living in Los Angeles with the platform that George Gascon promoted of reform that was very short on specifics. And when, for instance, one of his special directives when he came in on December 2, 2020, was to eliminate all 3 strikes charging, I and my law firm actually brought a lawsuit against him on behalf of those 800 deputy district attorneys and won a preliminary injunction against that lawsuit, against that policy. So again, to the extent that the voters, I would argue, were given a reform bill without specifics, and those specifics then constituted violations of George Gascon's duty to enforce the law, coupled with the fact that I have a constitutional duty to enforce the law in any of the districts in which it's not being enforced, and would have then the vote of the state of California to do it. I believe that combination of factors would be persuasive to the voters of Los Angeles County as to why the law and safety and security are now being enforced and promoted.
I believe Ms. Schubert wants to make a comment. You're muted, unfortunately.
Of course. I just want to add, I agree with Mr. Hochman that the Attorney General has the constitutional authority. Right now, Mr. Bonta can go into LA if he wants to. He could have been the one to sue and tell him to do his job on 3 strikes, which the lawyers had to do. And I also would acknowledge that within a year of Mr. Gascon being sworn into office after he dropped the bomb of blanket policies on December 7th of 2020, that I led the effort of district attorneys across California of sending him a letter refusing to ever give him jurisdiction on any cases that had any impact or any cross designation or cross jurisdiction with Sacramento County. And that's because I agree with Mr. Hochman. The voters were duped in terms of what these policies would be. There's a reason why the lawyers had to sue. There's a reason why those lawyers support me for Attorney General, because they know I'm the one that's capable of stepping into that position and doing what needs to be done. So I thank you for that. I appreciate the response.
Mr. Bonta.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a couple quick points. One is there is already an Office of Legislative Affairs in our office where we work with my former colleagues in the legislature to move and support legislation that exists. And the California Department of Justice has existed for some time. And as California Attorney General, I work with all 58 county DAs and certainly honor prosecutorial discretion and the will of voters. That's very important. And will enforce the law and exercise any necessary oversight as appropriate. What we are focused on is the data, including the data of increases in violent crimes, homicides, aggravated assaults, highest or among the highest in the state in Sacramento. That's why we have worked to take down the Oak Park Bloods in a gang takedown. That's why we have our apps enforcement focused in Sacramento, in part, where I did a ride along. So very important. And I also want to say, we've been talking about a very critical issue of public safety for about 52 minutes so far, and it continues to be job number 1, 2, and 3 for me. But the California Department of Justice is also one of the last legal lines of defense for protecting constitutional and civil rights generally. We are defending Roe versus Wade in the U.S. Supreme Court, no less a court than that. We are leading state DOJs in federal court to fight against state laws that target LGBTQ plus kids. We've proposed changes to laws both at the state and federal level to strengthen gun safety laws to fight illegal guns on our streets. And we have taken on the homelessness and housing crisis that we have in California with our housing strike force, holding cities accountable to build consistent with state law, making sure tenants are not evicted into homelessness. Those are important areas for the people of California. Areas that I'm focused on, that I've worked on, where we and I have been a leader of action. And I have not heard anything from my colleagues about what they will do, if anything, to protect the constitutional right to an abortion, to protect our LGBTQ plus kids, to fight for more gun safety, and to address housing with real action that can be meaningful. So I want to make sure that it is clear that in addition to the critical issues regarding public safety that are job number 1, 2, and 3 for me, we are doing all of the above. Any fight that is a Californian's fight is my fight, and we will make sure to stand by them, be their champion. We're addressing.
Thank you. So, Mr. Early, I know you want to make a comment. We did want to squeeze in one non-public safety question before we reach the top of the hour. If you want us to, can you make it really quick?
I'll make it very quick. Mr. Bonta is the last person who should be talking to me about protecting people's constitutional rights, real property laws, etc. As I said, I run a nationally recognized law firm. We handle constitutional issues all the time. Real property laws. I'm one of the, I've been named by U.S. News one of the best lawyers in the nation on that 4 years running. I believe, frankly, SB 9 and SB 10 need to be looked at for whether or not they are constitutional. But I do want to touch base on something else. Mr. Bonta keeps talking about data. And like anything else, there's data and there's data. Okay? He looks at his data. I know there's other data out there that completely contradicts much of the data that he looks at. And frankly, I'm tired of him relying on the word data, just like Gascon does down here, to cover up for their criminal-loving policies that have left us in this criminal's paradise.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm looking at my colleagues, Golke. Why don't we go to Josh? Let's ask a question and we'll have everyone make a quick answer to it. But go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I'm glad the Attorney General brought up housing, because I did want to ask you all about that. He has indeed taken a much more assertive position in office on housing and enforcing the recent pro-density laws, which a lot of people are probably glad about, given the housing crisis we're facing. And maybe some people like to watch their housing values go up and don't like anything built next to them, aren't happy about. So I'm wondering whether, I think Mr. Early made his position clear on that, but I'd like to hear Ms. Schubert first, and then Mr. Hochman tell us whether we could expect more of that from them if they're elected.
Thanks for that, Josh. I appreciate it. First of all, we are in a housing crisis. We are grossly under building because of the high regulatory costs, the high fines, the litigation, the CEQA lawsuits, all of those things that are going along with it. My intention as Attorney General is I'm going to enforce the law. I get that we have many of these types of housing laws. Enforcement can come in multiple steps. It can be compliance. So you don't have to be out there throwing out lawsuits the first minute you see an issue. I think by bringing folks into your office, listen, these are laws. We have to be willing to enforce those laws, whether the density laws, all of those things. But we've also seen is CEQA being used as a sword to stop progress. And so we need an Attorney General that's going to allow housing to continue to be built in an expedited fashion, because we are at a crisis now. So as your next Attorney General, I have every expectation that I will follow those laws. I will work with those local and city municipalities to make sure that we have compliance and we meet the needs of the housing requirements and the needs that we have right now.
Thanks, Mr. Hochman.
So I agree with what Ms. Schubert says with respect to the need for housing. But what's interesting about SB 9 and SB 10 is that it's not dedicated to creating affordable housing, or at least housing for low-income citizens across California. It is as much dedicated to allowing developers to build multi-million-dollar units in high expensive communities as it is to actually deal with the absolute need we have to build a huge amount of housing in the next 5 to 10 years. 100% I would follow the laws on the books. That's the job of the Attorney General. But to the extent that Mr. Bonta is saying that this is his effort to deal with homelessness in the state of California, quite candidly, that's a joke, because you cannot build enough units to deal with the problems of homelessness, 70% of which are created by the fact that people are dealing with serious mental illness and substance abuse, or both. If you don't, for instance, deal with those problems, the fact that you might build more housing will not solve homelessness in our state, won't even solve the homeless issues that we have in our state. So we have laws on the books right now that don't deal with affordable housing. Mr. Bonta not focused on the homelessness issues that are dealing with the fact that we have a quarter of the nation's homeless in the state of California. And I would do my best to tackle both deal with either support laws that would deal with affordable housing and support the laws in particular, for instance, like the care accords that would give the courts the ability to mandatorily order treatment for mentally ill homeless people, and bring back AB 1542, which was set to do the same thing for people with substance abuse disorders.
Okay, so we are right at the top of the hour, and I know that there are folks who want to continue speaking, but we want to be respectful of your time. So we will have to leave it there.
Marco, I didn't answer that question directly. I came at it from the answer to another question, so I'd like to be real quick on it and real brief.
I understand that, but Mr. Bonta, it was my understanding that you have a hard deadline at noon. Is that correct? Do you want to stay for a little longer? Listen, or if not, we will let you go on your way on your busy day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, hard stop at noon.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Mr. Trentran. We'll let Mr. Early finish, and then we will wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Of course, Attorney General has to enforce the laws on the books. SB 9 and SB 10, as you may have known, and there's some municipalities already in the state of California looking at whether to attack SB 10, I believe it is, on constitutional grounds. I do want to charge certainly lawyers, some of these brilliant lawyers in the DOJ, to see whether some of these laws that have come out are in fact constitutional. We have an absolute duty to follow the Constitution. We do not have a duty to uphold unconstitutional laws. Severe mental illness, frankly, I think is one of the most important problems we face in this state and this nation, and there's almost no talk about it. There are things we have to do. Read the book American Psychosis, when the entire system was taken apart starting in the 1960s and never properly rebuilt, the mental health care system. And as far as data, I want to be clear. I support the use of data too, but there are different forms of data, not just the one data. We have to look at all the data. And finally, I would say homelessness, huge problem in this state. And you could give all the free housing you wanted to these homeless. And unfortunately, I would say at least 70% of them are so severely mentally ill, there is nothing they could do to care for themselves in those homes. I have a whole plan for homelessness. I don't have time to talk about it now, but nobody's ever talked about the plan that I have. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for having me today.